I got into the Christmas spirit this year by watching the new movie Journey to Bethlehem and listening to its soundtrack. One reviewer called it a romantic comedy, and the songs, stories, and characters focused on some very entertaining aspects of Joseph and Mary's courtship and marriage. One scene in particular showed Joseph helping to get ready for the birth of Jesus and trying to make his wife as comfortable as possible. Although things like that aren't described in the biblical texts about the birth of Jesus, there are 4 stories in the gospel that feature Joseph and help us understand the high level of generosity that he offered at the birth and childhood of Jesus. The first story is in Matthew 1:18-25, where Joseph learns that his fiancée, Mary, will have a baby. From Joseph's initial response through the birth of the child, he is described as a righteous man who generously affirms everyone involved. He affirms his wife by first planning a secret divorce to prevent her from being disgraced, but then publicly marries her. He affirms his future son by keeping Mary a virgin, so there can be no doubt about the child's divine origin. And he affirms the Lord's plan by obediently naming the baby Jesus, even though there is no ancestor named Joshua, the Hebrew version of Jesus, in Joseph's lineage. Joseph-level generosity affirms. When you support the work of a church, organization, or ministry, you affirm that you care for their mission in a way that goes far beyond words. The next story is in Luke 2:21-24, where Jesus is presented in the temple. Joseph and Mary visit Jerusalem, where we learn that Joseph-level generosity sacrifices. This story fulfills 2 different parts of the law. Exodus 13 required a sacrifice for every firstborn son, and Leviticus 12 required a sacrifice on behalf of the mother 40 days after the birth of a male child. If they had the money, a year-old lamb was the expected sacrifice, but if not, they could use 2 turtle doves. Now, when you sing the 12 days of Christmas, you probably think of turtle doves as something special, but they were actually inexpensive birds for a poor person's sacrifice. Joseph's sacrifice kept Jesus compliant with the law from the earliest age. And when you make a sacrificial gift, no matter how large or small, it teaches others to realize how important obeying the Lord's will is to you. After the wise men left, Joseph had 3 dreams in Matthew 2:13-23. The first dream in verses 13-15 reveals Herod's murderous intent to kill the child. So Joseph quickly takes his family to Egypt. There was a large Jewish community there, and Joseph's trade as a carpenter would have provided a good living to support his family. Growing up in Egypt was not God's plan for the Messiah, though, so in verses 19-21, he has a dream telling them to leave. When they returned, a final dream in verse 22 pointed Joseph to Galilee to settle away from Herod's ruthless son. Each of Joseph's obedient moves protected Jesus from danger and fulfilled God's purpose. Joseph-level generosity protects even when it isn't convenient. When you generously help someone in need, you protect them from an uncertain outcome and also show them a glimpse of God's heart. Joseph's final appearance is in Luke 2:41-50, where 12-year-old Jesus is left in Jerusalem. Don't dismiss Joseph as a careless young father. Instead, listen for the word searching. In verse 44, they spent a day searching among relatives and friends in their traveling party. In verses 45-46, they spent 3 days searching Jerusalem before they found Jesus in the temple. And Mary's poignant words of verse 48 say this, "Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." Now, Jesus reminds them that they should have been looking in the temple first, but he also acknowledges the urgency of their search. Joseph's level generosity searches for those who need to be found. I hope you support something that searches for those whom God values, whether they are lost, left out, or looking for purpose. Your generosity might help them to be found. Joseph's generosity was a human expression of God's ultimate generosity. The gift of Jesus affirms that we are important to the Father. He sacrifices to meet the demands of a law we could not keep. He protects you from the efforts of Satan and this world to kill and destroy. And the gift of Jesus ultimately searches as far as necessary to bring you and everyone else back to God. Joseph's generosity helped the generous gift of Jesus become real for each of us. And every time you see Joseph in a manger scene, I hope you will remember his level of generosity and think about how God calls all of us to be generous.